Pete, appreciate you hopping on today. Super excited for this one and getting a ton of college sports, NIL, transfer portal questions. So had to bring on one of the top voices in it now to lay it out for us. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me on, man.
So Pete, I guess give us a little background first. Who are you? How did you end up at On3? How did you end up in this college sports NIL world? And then we'll start to dive into what's taking place in the space these days.
Yeah, awesome. I'm a 2019 graduate of Ohio University, Athens, Ohio. Go Bobcats. And right out of school, got a job covering Dartmouth athletics. And that came with some interesting twists and turns, interesting covering that level of D1. And then, had some connections on On3 when it was launching, and kind of joined as like a desk writer / like managing editor and started there and kind of worked up the climb and a lot of credit and gratitude goes to Shannon Terry for giving me the opportunity to kind of be a college business writer and ran with that. And I guess now that was like 3 years ago, give or take. And from there, it has just become, I do the transfer portal, kind of do all things college football. I'm 28. I'm still trying to work in trying to get into the college football coaching transactional world. But yeah, I mean, the opportunity they gave me to do college business has now grown into something that as high school Pete would have like dreamed to do. And it's been quite the journey. I lived in Columbus, Ohio for the last 4 years, moved to Nashville this past summer. It's been awesome being in the office and working with people in person day to day. And didn't think I was going to be where I'm at right now at the age of 28. So really just grateful.
That's awesome. Yeah, and what from the college lens, like anything that interested you on that side from the get-go, like it was never pro sports or other things, anything that drew you to that?
Yeah, so I grew up in New England. The Patriots meant like everything to me, to like 10-year-old Pete. But like I was always kind of around college football too. Went to a lot of BC games, went to a lot of UNH games, University of New Hampshire games, and I think was always drawn to the sport of football. And then kind of ran with it being college football. And I think in college is kind of when, I mean, I covered the Ohio team there and stuff. And I think that's kind of when I made the decision, like, hey, I want to cover college sports. Get a lot of one-on-one time when you're as a beat writer, right? When you're following a team. And then when I got this job at On3, it quickly became like, okay, like every day is like, who the hell knows what's happening? And it changes so quickly. And for someone like me, that's something that's really appealing, where there's always something to chase down. Have loved that part of it. A lot of credit to what those people do covering the NFL and everything. And that's a wild ride too. But there's so much that college offers that I love to try to chase down and do that day to day.
Yeah, it's awesome. And where have you seen the most change from 2019 to 2024? I mean, it's two completely different worlds. I mean, I guess just even going to how you've managed that or navigated that and the evolution, and then we can start to actually get into the probably 15 things that have actually transformed.
So like NIL was not a thing when I was in college. And then even when I started on On3, NIL was in the early stages. So I didn't actually like take the college business job till 2022, so a year in. The most interesting like development to me has been right in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Like there was still competitive inducements that made all the difference. They just came in McDonald's bags or duffel bags, and now those dollars have surged. Now they're in the millions. There's going to be some teams with budgets like hitting 30 million next year when revenue sharing comes in. So the amount of dollars now being spent in college sports, specifically college football and basketball, has just been so interesting to me. But, the other thing that I spend so much time on now too is the transfer portal. And I just think back to how the transfer portal was almost like there was like the interesting cases of the guy who just didn't work out on a team. Maybe it be personal reasons or they get in some criminal action. And people might laugh at me mentioning that, but like widespread, like a lot of the guys who transferred were not exactly the best players in the sport. And now we have this free agency that is just wild. And you have, I've heard a lot of people compare it to NFL free agency. I think it's like that. But imagine like Imagine a Baker Mayfield could just like pick up his things on a random January day and be like, all right, I'm going to go play for, the LA Rams because Matthew Stafford retired. And then the day after, the Rams maybe didn't pay him as much as he thought. So he's like, all right, I'm going to pick up my bags and go challenge Jordan Love for the Packers job. But that is what college football free agency is right now. It's completely unregulated. There's no enforcement. And on top of all that, too, the numbers being tossed around are insane. And the only way to really find out what the money is by you got to build up sources, you got to trust sources, and then you got to work to make sure you get some eyes on contracts.
Yeah, and how do you navigate that? I mean, I'm sure there's a million things thrown at you a day. Take away the actual output of the
Yeah.
content, or we'll get into some of your expert picks here and stuff in a second. But how do you just even manage? I'm sure your phone and email and stuff is constantly even being
Yeah.
blown up. Like, what does that look like?
So you got to filter it, and then you got to figure out who you can trust and can't trust. And part of that also just starts with not being able to trust anyone right at first blush. I mean, like I knew what the Jaden Rashada deal was worth when he first signed with them, but I didn't get a contract until like years later. Andy Staples, my coworker, has, but like I knew it was over $12 million. So the first few things that I've learned in doing this and trying to get the contract details is one, you can't trust everything. Two, you're not always going to be able to get the contract. So if you can verify with like 3 to 4 sources that this is the range of the contract, I can feel confident reporting what I've been told is the range of the deal. And then the other thing too is agents love to peddle numbers now to boost up their business, right? Like there was like 3 basketball players last year who got $2 million deals in the men's basketball portal. I still haven't seen a contract for one of those, but agents want to leak it so it looks good. So, but usually there's a small truth in what the agents are telling you. So if you can make the phone calls and figure out what is true and what is not true, you can there get a better picture. But whenever an agent gives you a number right off the bat, you almost have to take like $1 million to $2 million off of it.
Right, because they want to show all their
Right.
clients or potential clients what they're doing. So go through some of the key stakeholders in all of this, right? Because you have collectives and you have coaches and agents and then the players and families, and I'm sure
Right.
there's a bunch of others. Like, can you give us just a quick snapshot of all the different
Yeah.
entities just so people can even understand what takes place in one transfer move?
So, like going top down, and maybe it makes more sense to just look at college sports as a whole, and then the so like you have Congress now trying to get involved and enact some sort of legislation that's kind of being led by Ted Cruz. Then beyond that, you have the NCAA and then the college football playoff, and there's a whole other conversation to be had about who has more power in college football right now. And then from there, you have the Power Four of the SEC, ACC, Big Ten, and Big 12. And you could make an argument that they're more powerful right now than the NCAA. And then beyond that, too, you also then have right the presidents and athletic directors for all those schools. And then from there, it's the players, the coaches, the agents, the collectives, all of that. Now, what goes into a transfer? I mean, a lot of the time it's an agent hitting up another school and telling a coach that, like, hey, this guy wants to go on the portal. Or it's a coach who knows a kid from covering them in high school. It's like, hey, you had a really good year. Do you want to hop in the portal? Or it's just a bag man hitting up an athlete and being like, hey, we'll pay you X amount of money if you transfer to our school if you want to jump in the portal. There's more factors to that, but I'd say that those are like 3 of the broad ways kids go in the portal. And then probably the 4th one would be like a parent wanting their kid to go in the portal to get cash.
Right. And where do you see a lot of the biggest problems today in the space covering it?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know if I want to name like one problem, and like as someone who covers it, I try to like not say what the problem is, but I think the problem that I hear about the most is so many coaches and collectives frustrated with you sit down at the table, you offer a really impressive number deal. Let's just say it's like $3 million for a quarterback, and then the quarterback takes that deal and shops it around. and they get more money and then they go in the portal. Like, that is the most frustrating thing that I hear from coaches and collectives. So that's one problem that I hear about a ton. And then the second thing is just like the story's not told enough, but the kid who goes in the portal who thinks he's going to make $1 million and then leaves more money behind at the old school. So I don't think there needs to be enforcement. I just think that the portal has become something that's just so unregulated that it hurts all parties one step or the other, right? And if an athlete benefits, which happens a ton, that means the school left behind is hurt. And then if the athlete goes in the portal on some false promises, then it's the athlete that gets left hurt. So while so many athletes are benefiting, right? Like Carson Beck has a great opportunity this year at Miami. There's also plenty of athletes who aren't going to have the same opportunity as Carson Beck. So I don't know. I think a lot of athletes though do like the portal. There was I think you've had him on before. Jim Cavell had the athletes.org players summit during the college football championship weekend in Atlanta. And like I asked all the guys they had talked to the media, I said, so like there's this new proposal going around about only 10 days to go in the transfer portal. And I said, who would benefit from that? Like, would you guys want that? And it was a resounding no. Like almost everyone in the room was like, yeah, we're not doing that. So players obviously like it and appreciate it, but at the same time, some players do get hurt once in a while.
Interesting. Now, this is probably a pretty, I don't even know the word for it, question, but just sitting in it every day, all day consumed, do you feel like college sports, NIL, transfer portal as good, if not better than basically everyone? Like you can talk that shop. I'm just curious of like someone that sits in it. Like, do you also see yourself as sort of an expert because you see a little bit of everything, or how do you really view yourself from let's just call it like a thought leader?
Yeah, I get to ask that question a lot, and people are like, you're the expert. And my answer is, no one's an expert because it changes every day. And even if I walk away from the day feeling like I've learned something important, I'm sure there's something else out there that I didn't learn. So while I like to think that myself and Steve Wolfong, my coworker who's done this forever, do a great job covering the portal and have the best intel on where guys are going, that also be a lie in there too, because of just how many guys there are out there that we struggle to get info on, whether it be their players or their parents are running their recruitment. It's hard to get info on, or they strictly just don't want info out there on them. So like the idea of me being a thought leader is like really humbling and grateful that someone would think that, but I don't think I'm a thought leader. I just think I'm someone who tries to track down info and report facts. And sometimes that really pisses people off too.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, let's take the expert word out of it, even though it is on the website.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But your expert predictions,
Yep.
97%, rounded up a little bit, all time. Tell us a little bit about that. What goes into that?
I think I have 6 wrong all time, and I think right now I can name you all 6 that I've gotten wrong.
Yeah, you're
Stick with me.
one's they have the numbers real small for you, but
Yep.
you're 175 out of 181.
Yep.
And I don't even know how to see which ones were wrong. Here's one. But I'd be curious. Can you actually name the 6? That'd be pretty interesting.
There's a guy who flipped from Oklahoma to Texas. That was the first one. That was like way back last year. And then there's another guy who committed to Kansas State one night and flipped in May or April. And then there's a kid who was supposed to go to Auburn who went to SMU. The other one that always sticks with me is before Ohio State was going to take a quarterback last year, I predicted Will Howard to go to USC because he took a visit there. And then once I knew he was going to Ohio State, I was like, I kind of put the pick in already. Like, I can't flip that. And then there's a couple more, but putting in predictions are probably the most nerve-wracking thing I do. And the reason is, like, we talk to these agents and these schools and these players, and I'm so grateful that these guys take the time to talk to me. Like, I'm the 28-year-old. I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure I piss some people off sometimes because I'm so annoying and trying to get info. But if you put a pick in though, and like you feel good, the guy's going somewhere, you then need to like follow that recruitment like nothing else for like whether it be the next 72 hours or 2 weeks. So there's also situations too where you have a good idea the guy's going to commit and you put a pick in. But sometimes you got to really feel good about your intel to put a pick in.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, I'll take that pick every day. 197%, 185 out of 191. That's really good. And yeah, it seems like the Ohio State ones, I was just going through them. Those, whether they're going there or not going there, seem to be some of your trouble, which is interesting.
Huh.
Even from, but yeah, anyway. Tell us a little bit about JUCO and what's going on there and some of
Yeah.
the discussion.
So the Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia, right, filed a lawsuit in the state of Tennessee arguing that he should have extra years of eligibility because he played 2 years at junior college and that shouldn't count against him. He also made this case out because of that. He left NIL dollars on the table if he didn't come back for another year. Judge granted his preliminary injunction against the NCAA, basically making it close to impossible for the NCAA to come down on enforcement when it comes to junior college athletes now playing college football or other sports. And by that nature, the NCAA came out and basically said, like, hey, for this upcoming year, we're going to put on pause. We're going to allow athletes now to play junior college to have that extra year that, like, Diego basically won in court just to avoid more lawsuits. It opens up a lot of floodgates. The ramifications would be really interesting. Not every athlete goes to junior college right now. So the number of athletes who, like, would have this opportunity isn't huge, but it does open the thought process of what if you went to junior college, Andrew, and then you suddenly had like 6 years to go to JUCO, get good grades, succeed on the court or the football field, and then that's like another 2 years of your college recruitment.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. How do you think through the timeline of this? Because the NCAA's even talked about 5 years now. And I mean, where's the perfect number? Is this in a traditional pro league, NFL, NBA, whatever? There's no time frame. You play as long as you can play until you're not good enough. But college is a little different where you have these, or at least supposed to have these time frames. I saw a post, I don't know, maybe it was you or someone on X, just about you could theoretically play 11 years in college now. Do you see a sweet spot number? Like where just even number one, do you see anything? So just, without opinion. And then also, what is your opinion on, like, where is that right number of years for college athletics?
So my professional educated guess is 5 years because then it allows the athlete to redshirt. My personal opinion is until college education stops being a 4-year plan, then it probably needs to stick somewhere between 4 to 5 years. So the interesting thing though too is like what if you fail a class? What if you there are obviously ways things could get pushed back, but college sports was never meant to be like the 10-year sports career. It was supposed to be like 4 or 5. So I think it sticks something to that. We might talk about this later, but college athlete employment, right, might be a thing in the future. And now you have revenue sharing. Does that open up the opportunities where we have athletes stay longer in college sports because they're going to make more money as a college athlete than they're going to make from, being a businessman or something like that? And that's that conversation is on the horizon. Collective bargaining and employment are not real yet. Those are things down the road that might or might not happen. But even with revenue sharing now, that's supposed to start in July 1, it really opens up a can of worms where you wonder, like, that quarterback might not be as profitable as ever before.
Yeah, I mean, I think you even see that with Carson Beck, right? I don't know, what is it, 4 million or whatever? Again, reported. I don't know if that's factual.
I didn't report anything. I can just tell you that from everything I know, it's definitely over 4 million.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that seems pretty accurate, but
yeah,
there's no incentive for him to go to the NFL. I think he is
right.
an NFL caliber guy, right? Brock Purdy, I don't know what he got, 800K or something this year. He'll sign a big contract now, but
yeah,
What
So,
are the
like, here's a good situation with Carson Beck you bring up. Carson had a rough 2024 season. He injured his UCL in the SEC title game and had surgery. He was not going to be his best self in the NFL draft. He was supposed to be a first-round pick. Maybe he would have gone on day 2. He comes back for another year. He's going to make more money than he would have made in the NFL draft. It's a really interesting situation there. And obviously, he'll go to the NFL after this year, and that'll be that. But like the idea of a quarterback continuing to come back, like Dylan Gabriel turned down the NFL last year because he knew he was going to make more money as an Oregon quarterback. It's same thing with Will Howard. So it's interesting. I think you're going to see a lot more good players, not great players, stay like as long as they can. Now the Jeremiah Smiths and Caleb Downs of the world, like they're going to go to the NFL as soon as possible.
Is there a world though? And now I'm just speculating, but if you look at, let's just even take the P4, put them in a super league, super conference, whatever you want to call it. To say you have 60 teams.
Yep.
In essence, that media rights deal would be as large, if not larger, than an NFL media rights deal.
No, I totally agree.
If you go 50% or around there, 49, 51, whatever, the players would essentially be entitled to half of that, if that's where it went.
Yep.
Is this now potentially even a competing product to the NFL and pro sports, especially you can start to go longer? Or where do you see that relationship standing and headed? Because it's certainly on an interesting trajectory and path with the money that we know is already coming in and is just scratching the surface of where it's going to go.
So like a year into like me covering college business, I started having conversations with people. I'm like, so like what is holding people back from breaking off and under the college football playoff umbrella? You could have better enforcement, more succinct rules, probably more regulated transfer portal, and a much larger television deal than each conference trying to sell itself. I think it's only a matter of time. Now, a lot of things need to line up with like TV deals ending and things like that. And now the CFP is going to start another agreement next year. So some things you're going to have to line up on paper for that to ever happen. But big picture wise, it makes the most sense for college football to make the most dollars. And that's what the commissioners and everyone high up wants. It's a money race. That's why Fox and ESPN have so much say right now in what college football is because they're paying top dollar for these products and they have a lot of say. Beyond that too, when you look at athletes' rights, it does open up another really big question like you just mentioned of like, so why wouldn't an athlete try to stay as long as they want, especially if the dollars are just going to continue to soar? We've seen lawsuit after lawsuit where the NCAA loses and like another very like pillar of their existence like goes away, whether it be athletes being able to negotiate deals before they commit, multi-time transfers. Now it's going to be JUCO. Unless Congress steps in, things are really going to continue to go off the rails.
We're talking a lot about football and basketball, and that's obviously where you sit. How do you see the Olympic sports side playing out just from the thousands of conversations you have and will continue to have?
It's a interesting topic where a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. By no means do I have like a succinct opinion like I do on some other things. I think the one interesting thing here is, and you know, I don't know why I'm bringing him up, but Pat Forty at Sports Illustrated has done a lot of good stuff on this, specifically because he has had a few of his own kids be swimmers. And he's brought up a point that I just now have in the back of my head all the time is Olympic sports in college are the pipeline of the U.S. winning Olympic medals. If that goes away, while it might not have a short-term effect, it's going to have a massive long-term effect. And I think it's something that a lot of people have a problem with in the years to come if it goes down that rabbit hole of like Olympic sports going away or funding completely slashed or like significant scholarships taken away. I don't think that can happen for like the college sports model that we have. and the way a lot of people want college sports to help the Olympics and things like that. But if college football does break away and all the money goes over there, just a really fascinating situation that college sports is going to face.
I think that's the fun thing about this conversation is me and you talk to a lot of people can have good ideas, but really no one knows. And so you can just present, here's what
Yeah.
I think might happen, or here's where it's leading, but no one really knows, which is quite interesting about this space. And there's so many dynamics, both macro outside of sports into macro
Yeah.
sports, and then down into college and everything that's going on. And then especially as you go to youth and you talk about Olympic sports, and
Right. So
it's
like I can call enough people and figure out like if Carson Beck is going to be healthy on like any Saturday. Anyone who tries to like sit around and like ponder and then like attempt to say they know what's going to happen in college sport, they're full of crap.
yeah,
No one
I agree.
knows. And for all the phone calls made to congressional leaders, who knows if they're going to like that is the biggest gamble. And while I have come to believe that Congress stepping in is probably going to like be the most succinct plan moving forward because the NCAA sure isn't going to do it. It's that's also one of the biggest gambles in college sports.
Yeah. Well, I think it's all a cycle too. Like we're seeing this privatization / capitalism come into it, for better or worse, however you want to view it. And I don't know how much you look into this space. I'm sure you have conversations and you might be apt to speak on it, but like private equity, even interested in thinking of college sports. What do you think about that?
I think private equity is coming. I don't know if it's in the next year or 2 years, but it's definitely coming. And you know, the other thing that has to do with private equity, and I always think about Florida State with this, is like we've seen Michigan nearly buy a national championship by bringing everyone back. We've seen Ohio State win a national championship by winning in the portal and bringing everyone back. Now, Penn State just bought Jim Knowles, the Ohio State defense coordinator. At what point is a school going to say, hey, F it? We're not going to ask our top donor to give like $10 million for like the 10th straight year or whatever. 10 million probably isn't a good number to use, probably less than that. But the point stands. We're going to go get private equity to put a team together. And the ROI from us winning a national championship will be able to pay off like the PE loan. I know everyone wants to talk about PE as like, you know, like funding for a new stadium or helping out here and there. But like, I really don't think we're that far away from like a school being like, hey, let's get some money from a PE firm and build a roster and see how it goes.
From what I hear, it's close. We'll see. Because in essence, and it'll depend on a lot of factors, like how it breaks apart, but these schools are cash cows in a lot of different ways themselves too. So often, but I don't know. You could also argue that PE likes things that are already built up, but yeah, there'll definitely be some plays into it, and it will be most likely, as you're mentioning, probably for some of those emerging things. Like a Colorado seems like a very target that makes sense for a lot of different reasons, right?
What are your thoughts on PE from a conference level? Do you think that adds much value if they take a PE loan? I don't want to call it a loan, right? Like, would you call it a loan? I don't.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the most viable options right now are more like loans.
Yeah.
And you're just paying back the debt versus an equity play. But yeah, I mean, I think conference level makes a ton of sense, probably more so than team sense right now.
Yeah.
And it just starts to get interesting, right? Like if you think about how the NFL and everything was built, it wasn't built like this, but now it's like there's all these entities that want sports as part of their portfolios. And so it's, hey, can we take our capital and build this and do it faster? But then it's ultimately to flip it or get an ROI. And so you just create this cycle of the NFL doesn't get new management. The teams may flip owners, may flip management, GMs, coaches, whatever. But if you do that on a league conference level, what does that look like where you're flipping and you have new Roger Goodells every year, but just call it for college, whatever. So
I could definitely see though, like the ACC and Big 12 taking some PE money just to catch up in the TV distribution that it lacks in with the Big 10 and SEC. That seems likely.
I mean, I'll say this, college sports is super under monetized in general. I mean, there's so many ways you can make a ton more. And I think that's where it is of, hey, we're going to bring in capital. There was a big consulting firm that came in. You may know about this,
Yeah.
may not, but did study on what happens if you fire the entire athletic departments, inject PE capital,
Yeah.
and then build them like front offices. I mean, if you do that just across, let's call it the P4, 60 schools, if it was a super league, that makes a ton of sense. But
Yeah.
again, there's just so many other factors from education and
Yeah. The
yeah, it's
Olympic
super,
sports.
yeah,
Yeah.
Olympic sports. And it's, what do you think about the value of an education now from that? Like, I mean, obviously that's changing now. Like, who goes to school to, they go for the money, right? Who's going to pay them the most? I mean, I get there's a fit and there's other things, but I mean, we're forgetting that people still have to go to school, I guess, right? Like, what do you see it from the education lens?
So the value of an education in college football and college basketball has been extremely devalued, I'd say, in the last decade, maybe even longer. I think the value of an education is still like really high for Olympic sports. But when you look at college football and college basketball, so many athletes are now making decisions on who can give my family life changing money, who is going to help me get to the league the fastest. And like, I know I sit in rooms all the time where people make extremely good points to athletes of how, right, like the 1% makes it like big time in like the NFL or in. But there's so many athletes with those dreams these days. I don't think many are making their college decisions off, I'm going to go get a pre-med degree so I can go be a doctor. I don't hear about that a lot. And maybe that's just because I'm so focused on the power fours and everything. And I'm sure at the group of five level and the mid-major level, the value of an education is really high. But in the top echelon now of college sports, I don't think it's highly valued.
I do agree. What's got you excited for, I know we're a month in already. What's got you excited for the rest of 2025 personally, professionally, at On3, on anything else you guys are cooking up?
Yeah, professionally, I'm really excited to just continue to grow. I feel like 2024 was like the craziest year ever just because of the opportunities I got and stuff like that. And now 2025, I want to become like a, sounds so cliche, but I want to become like a master of my craft of what I do. I think 2024 was so much being like learning and just trying to do things on the fly. And I hope 2025 is the year that I continue to expand and grow and master what I do and the job and what I do and things. It's all about who you know. So like every year, it's just trying to expand my network.
Well, but for anyone listening, whether they're in college looking to make a switch, we get a handful of those people as well. If you wanted to enter the sports media world or the college
Yeah.
sports world, similar to what you're doing, any advice or insights to maximize the chance of how you've been on a good trajectory from Ohio to obviously the opportunity now at On3?
Yeah. I'd say I came from a newspaper background, and for some reason, everyone in the newspaper business didn't think highly enough of the internet, and they were also wrong. And I know newspapers are dying more than ever, so my first thing would be do everything you can to work for the internet. And then beyond that, too, learn what you're good at, and then make sure you're really good or great at it. Trying to do like way too many things is probably not going to work out for you. And I'm not saying early on, like in college, I did everything I could, and that's why I feel like I was able to jump into a job right away and do it well. But once you like are doing what you want to do, whether it be right, I'm covering college sports, not for On3, which I love. Like spend a lot of time on it and make sure you're good at it and don't half-ass it because media companies don't have the time of day now to hang out with people who only want to work 8 hours or off on the weekends. I mean, uh, the media landscape's changing so much. There's just no room for someone to sit around and half-ass it. So you got to work your ass off. You got to know what you're doing. And then I guess beyond that too, you got to learn how to build a network and talk to people. You got to be okay knowing that you got to take the phone call at 10 o'clock at night, even if you might be in bed and your girlfriend's pissed at you that you're on the phone. It's like, all right, well, you want this life? I want this life. Like, this is what you're going to have to do. So I love it. That might be half the reason why I'm okay with half the crap I put up with, but you just got to work hard and you got to know that people aren't paying you to sit around. Like you gotta work your tail off.
I love that. Yeah, and the like it part is probably the
And
shining light of that, because if you don't like college sports, it's probably going to be hard to do
the
everything that
last
you
thing I'll
said.
say too is just don't take things for granted. Like don't think like because you showed up to work, like that's enough. Like you gotta prove your value.
I love it. Where can people get you online, socials, follow you, and make sure they're getting all your picks and
Yeah. So
everything?
I'm at on3.com, and then my X handle is at Pete Nakos _. So,
Amazing.
but yeah, man, thanks so much for having me on.
I love it. No,
Appreciate
this
it.
was awesome, Pete. Yeah, excited to get this out, and man, what a fun time in college sports. I'm sure you'll be on sooner rather than later as we try to keep up with this.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Have a good one.